Welcome, everyone, to Aryaka's report on Enterprise Network Transformation 2023 edition. And this report is an evolution of the successful State of the WAN survey that we've published for the last 6 years. So we hope you find the learnings and the observations very insightful, and I hope you can use them in the day-to-day interactions you have across your enterprise IT teams. Joining me is Sean Kane, Director Research Analysis at Aryaka. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So a couple of slides on demographics and background. One of the things that we really tried to focus on this year were more of the senior IT leaders, the people that were really in the decision-making roles. So you see we really focus on directors, even the VP level, and the C level. So these are people that are directly impacting, directly responsible for the strategy of what's happening with networking and security across their enterprises. And the other thing we did is we tried to focus a little bit more on some of the key demographics. Obviously, we have the United States, but we also have really good input from the UK, Germany, India. One thing that we saw is that there's increasing commonality across the globe. And it's not really surprising because enterprises, especially global enterprises, have the same issues wherever they are and wherever they do business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to introduce the 5 key themes that we identified.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Dave. I think, as we take a step back and we started to think about the evolution of this survey, the State of the WAN has been great. And just the kind of the chaos of the global ecosystem, what's going on in the world. And we said, hey, this is bigger than just the State of the WAN. Let's take a look at kind of what's happening and how it's impacting the decision makers at these enterprises, specifically on the network front. And what bubbled to the surface as a course of doing the survey, it was a great survey. We had some great feedback from key leaders around the world. Were really these big 5 themes. One couple we were really interested in, like, hey, what's the impact of the economy on decision making? Is hybrid work really here to stay, or is it just a fad that happened over the last couple of years? Like, what's the impact? We hear a lot about convergence of security and network. Is that really true? So oddly enough, the key themes all bubbled into what we're going to share here today. And the first of which is the economy. This was probably the most interesting part for me as we've seen the evolution of the economy coming out of a once-in-a-lifetime type of event with COVID and moving into now an economy where we're starting to see interest rates rising. We're starting to see inflation on the rise. You saw the first taste of some bank failures with SVB. You start to see headlines every single day about layoffs of some of these tech giants. So the question was around, is the impact from the economy, what's the impact on investment at the enterprise, specifically in IT, network, and security space? And the results that we got back were really interesting, which was there is definitely 100% an impact, but it's not in the way that you would think that it would be heading. It's not really about cutting budgets and looking to save on costs. There really is a doubling down on investment into specific technologies like cloud and network and security. So one of the questions, which was kind of one of the big ones for us, was, are you increasing your investment in cloud services? And this was overwhelmingly a yes. I think when you think back over the last couple of years, one of the things that COVID taught all of us was that, and at the enterprise level, was that enterprises were sometimes caught a little bit flat-footed. And so what they really need to invest in was flexibility. And I think the cloud opens that door to flexibility. So 98 out of 100 participants, so 98%, said, hey, we are definitely investing more in cloud services. And then when you look at the timing of that investment as well, you start to see an overwhelming majority on accelerating our adoption of cloud and network services. So, we'd sometimes joke around here to say these 5-year roadmaps got compressed into 5 weeks or 5 months. Coming out of that, no one wants to be left flat-footed again. So there's a doubling down of investment into cloud infrastructure and adoption of these services, and then the network and security infrastructure as well to make it all kind of work and happen. So you only see a very small percentage, 19% actually slowing the adoption, whereas in the middle there, 28% are focusing on very specific solutions in order to save costs. And the key to all of this, the theme is really around flexibility, which is what one of the things that the cloud opens up for them.
This really helps dispel the we'll call it an urban legend that people are de-investing in their critical infrastructure. But I think what's coming out here is that it's not a peanut butter approach. They're looking at their budgets and they're investing in the areas that are most strategic going forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely. I think coming out of the pandemic, it was definitely a focus on like, hey, what is our strategy and how do we actually execute and focus our investment on delivering on that strategy sooner rather than later.
Okay, excellent.
So yeah, and I think that really ties to kind of the next key theme, which was around hybrid work. And we talk about also how overnight some enterprises went from completely in the office to completely out of the office. And now enterprises are getting back into what is becoming the new norm, which is a little bit of both. Some folks are in the office, some folks are out of the office. Everyone does a little bit of time, a bit remote. So this core theme of hybrid work and having it be here to stay, and the impact then on IT professionals of having to manage network and security infrastructure around that environment. So when we ask, hey, when do you need plans for your hybrid workforce? 58% said immediately, and followed shortly thereafter by within the next 6 to 12 months. So hybrid work is definitely here to stay, and the solutions that are being put in place are a result of this new norm that we're seeing. And as a result of that, now you're starting to see real complexity in the network. So now you have employees that are everywhere. You have offices that are coming online, some are going offline. And the complexity of the network and the knowledge base and expertise, no one's really managed hybrid workforces at this scale before. So when you ask about biggest challenges from director of IT and CIOs and CISOs, is this combination, this was a multi-response question, where the complexity of cloud coupled with hybrid, coupled with an existing legacy architecture was the number one answer here. The number two was, I just don't have the teams, I don't have the knowledge and the expertise on staff to kind of manage this, which kind of ties into some later themes as well. And this, Dave, I thought was interesting because I think we have these surveys where you get these responses from sometimes folks you don't know, but it also aligns with the discussions that we're having with our customers, and as we go out into the market and just talk with some of the challenges. And what is this kind of, does that align with what you're seeing as well when you go out and have customer conversations?
Yes, but one of the things that came to mind here, and I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball. And we sometimes hear an adage that hybrid work, you can be productive, but you can't be creative. You can't push the envelope forward. And that's why some of the better known technology companies are asking people to come back into the office. I think what we've successfully done and demonstrated over the last 3 years is that you can be productive at home. I'm not going to say that being on 12 or 15 Zoom or Teams calls a day is the greatest thing in the world, but it works in a way. But going forward, do you think there's a way that we can create a hybrid work environment that allows you to be more creative, more innovative? Do you think that there's a place for that in the hybrid environment, or more and more people are going to have to go back in the office?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's here to stay. And I think the limiting factor in the past, I think, was just having the tools and services which now reside in the cloud, have them operating like they should. And so it was frustrating, I think, in the past when you were trying to access the corporate network or the tools that you use, the data you use, which resided in the cloud, and it would time out, or there'd be lag, or we all have the Zoom call where somebody freezes up. That is improving rapidly, and as a result of kind of what's happened over the last couple of years. So yeah, I think the adage of like, you're just going to be creative wherever you're creative, and we're just going to work where we're going to be. Sometimes that's in the office, sometimes it's not, but I don't think we're going to go back to pre-pandemic days where everyone is going back into the office. Yeah, I think you're going to continue to see this moving forward. So this, oddly enough, ties to the next key theme here of security and performance. So, there was always this ongoing battle, I call it, between network teams and security teams of performance versus security. And 9 times out of 10, security always won. And so one of the themes that we saw as a result, you'll see this in the data, is that it's no longer this or that. The state of the workforce is such that employees and customers are demanding both. They're expecting security, but they're also expecting applications to work as advertised. And you see that when you look at questions like this, which was, what is the most critical area of improvement for 2023 networking and budgeting? And nothing really stands out across these 3 big areas. It's all pretty much 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, which is to say they're all really important. We've got to do it all. And it's a hard and monumental task for IT teams to do it all. But really, it's the expectation of the enterprise, both from a customer perspective and an employee perspective. I expect things to work, and I expect them to be secure. It's just the way that it needs to be. And so when we look at that, again, when we tie in things like, what are some of the functionality of security functionality? What's listed here is some of the key functions from a SASE framework. So the Secure Access Service Edge. And again, you see a pretty even split across all these core functionalities, whether it's CASB or ZTNA or SWG or ATP. IT leaders are saying, yeah, I really kind of need all of this stuff. I don't really have the ability or freedom to pick and choose the things that I want. There's just an expectation of having cake and eating it too, which is hard for IT professionals to manage. But it's also very understandable from kind of the state and the competitive nature that enterprises are faced with today. And Dave, for this specifically, from a SASE functionality perspective, we talk so much about SASE and what's important, and how does SWG tie into ZTNA, and just, you've done a lot of research yourself. Are you seeing this evolution as well, this kind of convergence of all these different security silos that would sit in different silos that are now kind of converging into kind of one platform, one theme, one service that's being delivered by providers?
Yeah, I'm seeing that, and one of the things that we're seeing as a definite direction forward is when we look at the SASE security functions as being delivered at the cloud edge. One of the things that is coming more into the discussion is extending that further out, even into the CPE, even to on-prem. And so it's almost like a hybrid SASE architecture, if you could call it that, but it's still all cloud orchestrated. It's all next generation, as opposed to something that requires discrete security, hardware-based security appliances. But one of the other things that I'll mention, and the slide is really telling, is that we started in a world of connectivity. Then SASE was introduced 4 years ago or so. And I think in some cases, people over-rotated just to security, especially, as an example, security vendors that were coming at it without much of a networking background. And it may have caused some confusion. It may have caused some misdirection. The guidance that I give here is that we have the edge security functionality, but the connectivity is just as critical. It's just as highly important. And you actually show that on the last slide. You can't have one without the other. And if I look at it, think of it as a three-legged stool, your security, your connectivity, and your observability. If you lose one of the legs, the stool collapses. And so I think IT managers, CIOs have to be very cognizant of building a comprehensive solution that's going to meet their business needs.
Yeah, 100%. And that ties to really the fourth theme that we're seeing is that I think coming out in 2023, I think is a pivotal year where we're really seeing disruption from a provider perspective. And so the realization that perhaps MPLS really does need to go. It doesn't provide the flexibility that we as an organization need, or potentially the telco was not really built for the cloud that we actually operate in today. So we're really seeing this fourth theme of provider disruption. You see it every day. You almost become numb to it because you become so familiar with some of these providers that are offering services. But you start to get a flavor for it when you see things like this, which is what are your plans for MPLS? And 62% of respondents are saying they have plans to eliminate, like not even use a little bit, but eliminate MPLS. And only 7% are planning to invest more. We've seen this coming. We've seen the writing on the wall for many years. There was many articles years ago about MPLS being dead. Dave, what do you think is so significant about the kind of where we are right now, and why is that accelerating as we hit coming out of this pandemic and coming into 2023 as a pivotal year for why folks are really saying, hey, I need to flip the switch. I need to go to a software-defined network. I need to eliminate MPLS. Like what do you think is triggering that provider disruption?
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned this a couple minutes ago that enterprises were almost forced to put 5 years of transformation into 5 months because of what was happening with the hybrid workforce. And so we saw lots of those tactical moves. They put a lot of new things in place. And I think it's almost like the tail end of it right now. What are the longest contracts? Which were some of the things that were hardest to migrate? And MPLS is probably one of those things. And so what we're seeing now is as multi-year long-term contracts come up for renewal, IT within the enterprise is finally able to flick the switch and move to an architecture that is more flexible, that is more cloud friendly, that delivers better return on investment. The other thing I'll say about this is that this movement to services, but not all services are created equal. And what I mean by that is one of the issues, especially going to some of these managed, say, SD-WAN or SASE, is that you need the accountability, you need the ownership, and you need that end to end. So I think what IT needs to look at is not only the service is offering this speed, that's really a product feature-centric view. They need to understand what that overall service experience is, because that is eventually going to make the determination whether they fail or succeed with their transformation initiatives.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost as if the providers, the alternate providers, have really come up to speed from a functionality and service perspective, and it's disrupting kind of the legacy way that enterprises have managed the business for years. And so, like, it's to your point, when you now say, hey, for things like SD-WAN, which type of provider do you prefer? 41% are pretty clear in saying, I'm not looking for my traditional telco. They're looking for someone other than the traditional service, the legacy service that maybe has been in place for 10, 15, 20 years, to provide a new level of service that is encompassing more than just network connectivity, but also security, observability, and just purely the experience of dealing with something that's not necessarily a telco. And then, last but not least to that front, the last theme here was network as a service. And we've really seen this explode over the last probably 12, 18 months. And it's byproduct of all the things we talked about before, but also just the lack of expertise sometimes within the enterprise to do all of the different things that the IT team is asked to do. So it's no longer just having a network guy or girl. It's that network person has to also be a cloud person, a security person. And so it's hard and difficult, I think, sometimes to find that skill set. And now I think enterprises are leaning more and more on managed and network services as a result of that. So when we ask specifically at the C level, 96% of C-level IT leaders are expecting managed services and network as a service to play a bigger role in 2023. Similarly, on the managed services side, that the network security plans will be leveraged with managed services provider. Intuitively, this seems to make sense. It makes sense. It came out in spades from a survey perspective. You see it day in, day out from what you're reading. But Dave, just again from your experience, I know you have a lot of discussions as well with C-level folks and folks that are looking to kind of move their organization as a common house with us or other providers. Just again, is this kind of makes sense with what you're seeing, and what are some of the triggers for why C-level is leaning more on network as a service and help from outside providers as opposed to kind of doing everything in-house by themselves?
Yeah, well, one of the things is we know there's a stressor on the available talent, the internal budgets, the complexity with each new thing that you're adding on in terms of network or security complexity. If you're doing it on your own, you have an internal staff that's got to be able to understand that. And one of the sad points is once you train up these people, they're ripe for poaching. And so that's happening a lot. But the other thing that's happening, and I maybe get your take on this, is that this network as a service, it was a term that people were using 5 years ago, and it suddenly became back in vogue over the last 12 months. And there's some confusion. Is it something more for the campus? Is it something more for the wide area? And then how do you balance that? We talk about network as a service, but we talk about managed SD-WAN. We talk about SASE that lends itself to a managed service environment. How do you cut through the confusion here? If you're advising like a CIO, and they ask, well, I hear about network as a service, I hear about all these other things. What gives, and how do you guide them?
Yeah, I kind of relate it to from a terminology perspective. I think everyone is very familiar with software as a service kind of taking off, and we talk about the S curve of the evolution of software as a service. So now we know how it operates. We like the flexibility, the ability to turn things up and down. We like the pricing model. So folks over time have become accustomed to software as a service and now infrastructure as a service. The thing that has always lagged behind was just the network and security framework to connect those things. So I think just the terminology perspective is how we're going to start to see this adoption of network as a service, much like we saw with SaaS and IaaS, because it just makes sense. It's that next logical piece of the puzzle to bring the network and security framework, deliver it in a cloud infrastructure environment that connects all the pieces together. So I think when we start to talk about it in that light, it makes more sense about just the evolution, because it's not necessarily, it's really the how the services are delivered, which everyone has become accustomed to and understands why it's so why it makes such sense to have a model as a service.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I agree with you on that. If you look at just the number of people that understand the various cloud delivery models, just the budgets that's in the hundreds of billions of dollars, I think a CIO probably has an easier time getting their hands around SaaS and infrastructure, platform as a service that you talked about, and network as a service fits into that mental model where they don't have to go off and learn these new networking or security terms. So I think that is going to help to facilitate the adoption and help people to better understand, okay, what am I actually consuming here as an as-a-service model?
Yeah, exactly. So, hey, Dave, I know we're kind of running at the end here, and I think we just included some great stats. We encourage everyone. So here's kind of the resource component, some great stats from across the survey and some of the responses that we received. Here, you can take a look at this if you come back to the webinar or download it. But then I also want to turn it over to you as well. I know we've got a blog out, a newsletter, a podcast series, but just some great resources that are available to folks that are interested.
Yeah, Sean, yes, we'd like to offer it up. Please, it's good thought leadership pieces across all three of these type of assets. We've also uploaded a number of assets to the portal, so please download them. And if you have any questions, get in touch with us. And so really in closing, Sean, I'd really like to thank you for your leadership on the project, really putting it together, your helpful insights. And I hope for anyone following this, it's very useful to you going into what we consider to be a little bit of an uncertain time. And Sean, any other last comments then?
Yeah, no, like you said, Dave, it was a lot of fun. It was great getting the feedbacks, a couple surprises in the survey, and we had a lot of fun putting it together, and already looking forward to next year's edition.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and take care.